I'm used to sitting here and everybody take notes.
There is a notes page in the back of the program.
I'm going to do my professorial bit, which means I won't look at anybody. I'll just look at my paper and read the whole thing out. This is a cut-down version of a paper that the last time I checked was about 3 times as long as this one. And so if things sort of fall apart someplace in the middle, I hope you'll catch me up at the afterward and remind me that these pieces didn't fit together exactly. I want to talk about semantic primes, and to put this in the briefest possible historical context, I want to say there are 2 ways to do semantic primes. One of them comes from Plato, and one of them comes from Aristotle, like everything else in Western civilization. We got choices. If we're going to do semantic primes, in case nobody knows, semantic primes are concepts or words that are themselves undefinable, but are used to define all the other concepts and words in a language. You got choices. Either Plato's approach, if you will. The primes are given, they're taken over from intuition. In Plato's case, are memories of the actual structure of the universal forms. Or else they're found Aristotelianly by investigating the way concepts, words, work in the actual world. So you have a priori, a posteriori versions of this. I'm going to look at some specimens of languages which do or don't use semantic primes. And I'm going to start with OUI, which is the language of space, literally, that's what it means. Actually, it means the word of space, but the word is supposed to be taken in the broad sense of God's language. This language comes out of the 60s and 70s of the last century. It's a paradigmatic Platonic language. Its 2 avowed purposes are clear thinking by clarifying concepts and eliminating misleading words, and as a medium of universal communication. And when Weilgart, the founder, says universal, he means everywhere in the universe, not just all the countries on this one lousy planet stuck off in the corner someplace. He tells a story about getting this from space. Every word in the language has a clear meaning, and the meaning that it has is obvious immediately from the word itself. To do this, morphology and phonology intersect. Each sound, every letter, is also a morpheme with a fixed meaning. Words are then built up from these phonomorphemes to show the definition of the word. The concepts assigned to the sounds are primes, in terms of which all the other concepts can be defined. I should say about the letters, that in addition to the Latin alphabet, which he uses all of it, Q is vowel, but otherwise it's pretty much standard alphabet, except the capital letters are the long vowels and the lowercase letters are short vowels. You have therefore 31 concepts exactly fitting the Latin alphabet. He also provides a set of symbols that, in place of the letters, that are for the concepts directly rather than intermediately through the sound. And he goes on at some point or another to explain why the sounds are the right sounds in each case. So you start with these letters and you build up words from these atoms. And generally in the modifier modified pattern, adjective noun pattern. The right, with right grouping, so that the right chunk of a word is the modified part, and then the modifier goes to its left. There's a new sound added on, so things are constructed moving to the left, if you will. In general, that's the pattern. It's a Platonic pattern. You start with the genus and add a difference and get a new species, and that becomes the genus then for the next round of difference adding and so on. And this is the pattern. So, for example, O, capital O, long O, is feeling, sense. It, short I, lowercase I, is light. So, O is the light kind of sense, light as a modification of sense, and as a vision. Similarly, sound is E, the capital I, and so EO is the sound kind of sense, as I say, hearing. Now, the pattern that Plato and people who do this always seem to have in mind at the beginning is that a genus is a kind of thing, and then what you add, what you have in it is, the difference is something that kind of, something that is the genus kind of thing also has. So it's a proper, you get a pair, a modified pair, that is something that's true of both parts of which are true of the thing as you're talking about. The stock example is white hunter. A white hunter is a hunter who is white. The object is both things at once. The first thing to notice about just these examples of sight and hearing is that they don't fit that pattern. Here, the relationship is like lion hunter. The differentia is the object of the genus as a verb, for example. A lion hunter is somebody who hunts lions. A white hunter is not somebody who hunts whites. And we're going to see, as we go through some of this, that there are a lot of other things that modifier modified pairs can stand up for. Just to take one more hunter example, a good hunter is not a hunter who's good. You know, morally virtuous. Nor is it somebody who hunts good things or hunts good people or something like that. It's a person who's good at hunting. So it's an adverbial relationship at this point, or something like that. And the modified pairs can be just about anything. It turns out, in fact, that it's crucial to doing thoroughly Platonic versions of this, where you know, all the things have to go together in the same format as well. It's crucial to doing this that that format is itself ambiguous. But on the other hand, it means it doesn't really work because you can't read off from the pair what kind of relationship it is that you're assuming holds between them. You can't say, oh, a white hunter is like a lion hunter, it's somebody who hunts whites. Or is somebody, a good hunter is somebody who hunts good things. Or a good hunter is a hunter who is good. It doesn't work that way. The pattern in an ORI, as I say, is right grouping. The left term is the modifier to the right is modified. But there are a lot of exceptions to that, and some of them are completely regular. For example, I never could pronounce a U umlaut, and I'm not going to try it. I'll try it one more time. Which is polar negation, typically modifies not the whole thing to the right, but just the first chunk to the right. So that's an exception to the rule. It just picks up the first little piece of whatever comes after it. But not always. And this is where the Weilgart's other symbolism becomes handy. For example, we've got a word like ute, which means because, opposite mental toward, to read off the symbols. Which is where what is negated is the ut part, which is the form for in order to, mentally turning your mind toward, or something like that. It's mental toward. And I noticed passing, and this turns up a lot of times by Weilgart, just incidentally, ut is the Latin word for in order to. And you're going to see a lot of Latin words, a lot of Latin words turn up accidentally, or else Latin was really onto the universal language or something, I don't know. But the thing is, if you use Weilgart's symbols rather than the Latin alphabet, you can see that what's negated is the whole ut part rather than just the u, which would make an onion towards it. Because the corresponding thing to u is just the horizontal line over the thing that's negated, so you can draw a horizontal line over the whole ut rather than just over u and say, see? Some other things that turn up totally regularly as non-right grouping are M quality and V action, both of which go on the ends of things and convert nouns into adjectives in one case, verbs in the other case. So, for example, remember, eo is see, is sight, and so eov is see, is the verb. But those are exceptions, and the rule really is right grouping, and right grouping that turns up even at, I would say, at the wrong time. R is the mark for positives, and so you've got something a rio, positive sight, which looks like it means good eyesight or something like that, 20/10 vision. But in fact means beauty, which, if you start thinking very clearly in terms of modifier or modified relationship, ought to be Eeyore. No. Although, no. It wasn't why he changed it. Sometimes you get, even in the although the pattern is left modifies right, even very early on you get cases where you get a left clump rather than just the next left individual sound, and a left clump modifies a right clump. So animals are os, lowercase os, living thing. Plants, which are also living things, of course, are eo, which is light livers. That is, things that live as a result of light. So animals are os. Air is cain rather, which is upward matter number, and upward matter is gas, the matter that goes up. And N is the standard word for, standard letter for number or quantity. And here it just means most common. So the gas is the most of. Air. So a bird is a kenos, a air animal. Most stuff makes perfect sense. But sometimes you get surprises too. Boss, B-O-S, together animal, and also the Latin word for cow. Might mean a herd animal. In fact, that's the first thing I said, boss. Oh yeah, it's a herd animal. That's a cow, as you expect. But it turns out that's not what it means. It means domestic animal, so it applies equally well to dogs and cats and parakeets and what have you. Because the together animal is not together with other animals, but together with us. The togetherness of things becomes their association with humanity, and sometimes even more particularly with me. The word for you is boo, the person together with me, the guy I'm talking to, as opposed to me, which is foo, the guy that's right here. This guy, which makes more sense. Dogs are a kind of boss. They're a wallamos, power, space, human boss. The metaphor for this, or the secret behind this, is that dogs are the domestic animal that make the home strong or safe. And home is ordinarily ua, human space. In this case, however, the order of things has to be changed. If you say wua, it's going to just collapse to wa eventually, and the u is going to drop out. So to prevent that, we just change the order of the two components a, u, and make wau, boss, so we don't have this problem. Again, if you read it off literally, it isn't going to quite work out right. And there's also the problem of why is wau, boss the right definition for dog? Yes, dogs are in fact, among other things, animals that keep us, our homes safe, but that doesn't really seem to be quite what dogs are. Weilgart maintains, of course, that the words give the necessary and sufficient conditions, the perfect definition of the concept involved, and obviously he's wrong. Os gives the necessary conditions. I say every animal has to be in fact alive, but it's not sufficient conditions since there are a lot of alive things that aren't animals, namely plants. Ila, the word for plant, it gives sufficient conditions. I say everything that lives by light is a plant, but it's not necessary because there are plants that don't live by light. They live off of some other plant, for example. And wauboss misses in both directions. There are obviously dogs that don't make the home more secure, or make it, in fact, a general disaster area. And there are animals that make the home more secure that aren't dogs. I mean, if you keep a pet lion, for example, pretty safe house. So what happens is you get words defined, and pretty necessarily. Imagine trying to say in a useful sized word what a dog really is. They have canine teeth, the spell out the Linnaean system in 25 letters or less, you know, kind of thing. It's not going to happen. And so, in order to make this work at all, you have to use things that aren't, in fact, the necessary and sufficient conditions. And that means what you end up using are things that are cultural, peculiar. We think of dogs as being the things, you know, the watchdogs and all that sort of thing come to mind. If we were in a different culture, we might think of dogs as being those horrible, terrible, awful, disgusting creatures. You know, the Arabic tradition about dogs, calling somebody a dog is not high on the list of compliments. It's the worst thing. Not quite the worst thing. There are parts of the camel that you can refer to. Now, the most famous of the cultural trap things, famous because it caused a small riot at Luther College in Decorah, Iowa, where Weilgart taught, is his definition of man and woman, male human being, female human being, which he puts down as vus, active male, active human thing, and ivus, inactive, passive.
Which is which?
Something very like that was said in the context of Weilgart's immediate area. The problems, these problems that I was just talking about, are not universal. They turn up in very particular cases in trying to do this kind of language construction. The classic ones are natural kinds, artifacts, colors, and kinship terms. For one reason or another, an awful lot of semantic prime languages, call them, whether a priori or a posteriori, get into trouble with these. And the philosophers who've looked at this problem tend to say something like this. These are hard to do as semantic primes because we don't learn these notions by description. That is to say, we get paradigm cases and we learn natural kinds, for example, from paradigm cases. If we try and summarize these paradigm cases in descriptions, we will come up with a description that doesn't always work. You know, we say a dog is a four-legged animal, blah, 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 that's our description of it, but then a three-legged dog comes along and it's still a dog. Oh, how can that be? It doesn't match the description, so you know, something's going wrong here. Water is still water. If some chemist comes along and discovers that they've been wrong all this time and it was HO3 rather than H2O that was involved, wouldn't change water at all. Stuff that was water before would still be water, and we just simply say, oh, we made a mistake about what the chemical composition of it was. The analogy is with proper names. No proper name ever works as no description ever works as a proper name. Standard logic joke. You know, Socrates is Socrates. If somebody said, you know, Socrates wasn't pug-nosed and proved it, so it would still be Socrates. It would still be the same guy back there that we were talking about. So the situation with natural kinds and artifacts is the same as that, and therefore the attempts to give the correct definition of some of these concepts is, philosophers would be inclined to say, bound to fail. So the way around this, of course, is not to give a definition, but to give some sort of reconstruction of the baptismal event. What was the thing that we learned the word dog from? You know, was it Fido and Rex sitting there in in your front yard driving the full of brush man away or something like that, then wall boss sounds like a pretty reasonable definition. The place where Weilgart does the best with this actually is in the color terms, which are notoriously hard. Color is qualified light with qualities, and then the qualities that are the colors are then specified by number. Color number 1 is red because it's the I've never imaged a rainbow. So anyhow, color number 1 is red. It's at the top or the bottom of the rainbow. I don't remember which. So it's and then yellow is 2, then and green is and blue is and violet is U and O get shifted around in Weilgart. So he says, the beginning, end are alpha and omega, therefore the O has got to be the last vowel in the thing. So he just changes the order. And he uses this trick again in another place where it's a problem with the chemical elements. He just adds the atomic number to the end of the word to A's, the matter part, the word for element. And so you get A's and on up through the list to whatever the last element is these days. I haven't kept up. And what's the song? And news of it has not yet come to ha.
These are the only ones of which the news has come to Harvard, and there may be many others, but they haven't been discovered.
Points to do.
There is a Larite among us, yes. Again, we have these, Weilgart does pretty well with kinship terms, of course, except that, again, you're forced back on the something other than the real difference. Sometimes it's something that is a real difference in the sense that yeah, they're really different that way, sort of systematically. But it's not the crucial difference. So the word for mother is bitlu, round parent. Let's just say it's not what we would look. But imagine trying to explain with that set of 31 concepts the actual physiological things that make somebody a mother rather than a father.
Or a stepmother.
Or don't. Actually, it turns out to be fairly easy, but I'm not going to go into it. The B2 for parent is already sort of strange. It means the opposite of child. Child is to the toward person. That is the person towards whom history is moving. Well, the person towards whom the biological process is going. People are what means that DNA has for making new DNA. That kind of thing.
When you're a mother, you're round and round.
So you get this strange sort of. Hey, and yes, mothers are round at a certain point of the process of becoming a mother, but that's handy, but not particularly central to the whole idea. So here are things to separate this one, just summarize it quickly. This works because the modified pair is not semantically solid. That is, it can take on a whole bunch of meanings. It works because we don't actually really define things. We pick out things that pick them out without picking out using terms that really define them. In fact, even when you pick out the things that really pick them out in some sense, you often don't use the word. I was saying, OE itself means language and space, you could say, but in fact it means space word. OE, mental sound, is the word for word, and the space word. But it means space language, which would be actually NUI, because NUI, the word for language, is lots of words. Not, again, a particularly stellar definition of this word. But that's too long. We need something shorter. So you just drop out a little bit of stuff that isn't important. The other problem, so you get this problem of sometimes you can't say what you want to say because it's too long. The sixth law comes whipping into place at some point, and as a prescriptive rule says you can't have a word that's disproportionately long for its commonality in the language. So if the word gets to be too long, you drop out some stuff in the middle. The opposite side of that is also a problem with these things. There are a whole bunch of wonderful short words that would just be really neat to use for very common concepts. Unfortunately, they don't mean anything. You've got fa, which means this space, as a here. You've also got af. What does space this mean? Nothing. And this goes on at every level. There always are in the word space proportion of the right size for some concept. There are a lot of concepts that belong there that don't fit, and a lot of things that fit that ain't concepts. So there are advantages to this of certain kind. But you end up with saying that something like OE is inaccurate, doesn't really give definitions, is unuseful by and large. Most of the words that get created are not words you're going to need. And it's incomplete. You can't get everything in there. That's your sort of basic Platonic language. I picked on OE because I know it. But every other Platonic language gets involved in the same sort of track, one way or another. And what happens, you get, in particular, you get these words that don't mean what they say they mean, and then you have to explain, why is it that boo is the word for you? Well, it's together person, but we mean by together, of course, we don't mean that the person is itself together. I mean, it's one person, how could it be otherwise? We mean it's the person who's together with me. That's narrative. That's not compressed definition. That's a narrative that explains the compressed definition, and it's the explanation, the narrative explanation that actually is functioning. Weilgart got wise. In the last edition of OE, the language of space, he has a dictionary of usual sort, and then he has an encyclopedia that explains virtually every word in the dictionary by going through and telling you the story that's really involved. Foo for me is probably not a problem, but foo for you takes a sentence to spell out, and some of the others. I mean, Walboss takes a paragraph to explain just what the heck was going on there, and why it isn't Walboss for that matter. So that's the purest kind of a priori approach, and that the jams that get it. Now, turn completely around to the complete a posteriori approach. I don't actually know a language that does this, but there's something called NSM, Natural Semantic Metalanguage, which approaches this very closely in the sense that it is going to find semantic primes actually in real languages and build things up from there. It's a linguistic theory, a linguistic program based on a number of propositions which are all meant to be empirical and could be tested and are being tested constantly. And every language is capable of being its own semantic meta-language. In any language, you can define the meanings of all but a small number of terms using that small number of undefinable terms. And furthermore, you can define these terms using a very restricted set of language frames. And thirdly, when you isolate these primes and frames in different languages, it turns out that the primes and frames are the same, in the case of frames, in some sense. The concepts represented by the primes of any language are the same as the concepts represented by the primes of any other language. And finally, the important part is, here's a list of, of those concepts. Hey, the list is at 63 at the moment. It started out at 14. It's been as high as 67, and it changes, maybe not quite hourly, but yearly. I think it's fair to say that about every other year a new list comes out where something has been added, something has been dropped, something has been changed as new data comes in. And this really is data-based very strongly. There's a hypothesis that this is enough. You go out and you test it on all the languages that you have at hand, and they have about 30 at the moment that they have people actively working in, and see if indeed this list will do all the things it's supposed to do. And it invariably turns out that there's some language that doesn't have something on that list, and some other language where it doesn't quite achieve the goals, where one of the words doesn't quite work the way it wanted to. And so there's the screwdriver gets down in there and you twist a couple of little more things until it works enough for this round, and then you get ready for the next round. It's important to notice that a couple of things here that are very different from OE, not merely that this is totally a posteriori, but that it's different in kind. First of all, the definitions that you're going to get in NSM are discursive. They're not subject or adjective noun kinds of definitions. They're going to be a little tail. And a little tail that, in fact, tries to recreate the baptism event for some kind of thing. This process is called reductive paraphrase. So you explain the word in terms of simpler words until eventually you get down to this basic set, and using this very tightly controlled set of frames. And the words are unambiguous, unlike OE, which has very broad, vague words. These are very precise, specific meanings in these words. The words that are used are ordinary words in the language, and are consequently probably vague and ambiguous all over the place. But in every case, the meaning that's going to apply in this project is one of those meanings, very carefully demarcated, you hope. Well, let me give you some examples. What do you get? Here's a sentence. X feels bad. X feels sad. What does this mean? Well, X feels something. Sometimes a person thinks like this. This is now building the scenario. Something bad happened. I didn't want that. I didn't. If I didn't know that it happened, I would say, I don't want it to happen. I don't say this because I know I cannot do anything about it. Because of this, let's say because I can't do anything about it, the person who says these things feels something bad, and then finally getting back to the case that we're talking about, X feels something like this because X thinks something like this. And this is standard pattern for emotion words. And which is one of the triumphs of NSM. NSM can do emotion words better than anybody else. And when you finish with one of them, you say, yeah, they really nailed that down. And you know, you do two emotion words and kind of hard to tell apart, and you look at the NSM thing, you say, yeah, I never really was quite clear about just what was different about those two words, but damn, they've got it. Or, you know, why is it that this word in English doesn't translate? You know, we always say it's the translation of this word in German, but it always misses something. What exactly is it? When we see the NSM for German, the German word and the English word, we say, yeah, that's it. The German word covers this area that this word doesn't cover. It's really beautiful stuff for emotions, and the general pattern here is the one that we just saw. X has an emotion Y, means that X feels something good or bad. And, sometimes a person thinks something like this, then you go through a series of thoughts, then you say, because a person thinks this way, the person feels something good or bad, and then you say X, where we started, feels something like this because X thinks something like this. Very nice job. And the differences in the various things is what goes into what this person thinks, you know, about what the situation is like, what your reaction to it is, whether you can do something or not. Yeah. Oh. Lots of luck. And you can go on. I mean, these are the motion words are the best ones, but there are lots of pretty good words for pretty good jobs on a whole bunch of other things. And if you got the sheet, there's a whole bunch of examples, and I won't get stuck on them too much. You can do some kinds of natural kind of things. You can do wonderful jobs with things like the subjunctive, which is ordinarily hard to do. So all sorts of great stuff goes on like that. But again, NSM runs into the same problems that run into that same kind of problems. It has trouble with natural kinds, with artifacts, and most notoriously with color words. When you see the NSM definition of X is green, you sort of walk away puzzled. X is green means in some places many things grow out of the ground. When I see things like X, I can think of one of these. Even Cliff Goddard, the exponent of NSM nowadays, admits this isn't quite an adequate definition. I mean, it says things are green if they look like grass. But of course it doesn't say that. It's because it doesn't say grass. And you've got this terrible thing. What happens if you come from a place where things that grow out of ground are mushrooms, mainly, and so you get this sort of grayish-brown color in mind. And then what does it mean to say, when you see something like X, you can think of places like this? I mean, when you see something, you can think of all sorts of things. You see something green, you think of money, you see something green. There's got to be something built into the notion of can think of that is limits what this you know, there has to be some relevance of it, has to be some connection with it. All these things are built into can think of, and yet they're not built into any of the actual frames that where can think of it was introduced. I mean, people don't, when you say you can think of this, you don't necessarily immediately get the right sort of association. So it doesn't work very well. On the other side of things, I mean, here they just have to get the other side of things. You've again got the problem of getting into things. It's easy to do kinship systems if you've got a few basic concepts going. And the problem is with NSM, we don't have any clue about how they're going to get those concepts going. I mean, you take a look at the things you've got as the basic 63 concepts. None of them are obviously going to get you into parent-child marriage and the things that are needed for kinship. Maybe they can do it. They haven't, and so we are left thinking that they're probably in trouble there. Another problem with NSM is this notion that all of these basic terms have a single specific meaning, and then the question is, what the heck is that single specific meaning? We know, okay, here's move. Move means one particular thing, and that's the use of move that we're going to use. And we talk about the standard frame, the canonical frame for move. And the canonical frame for move is he moved, or somebody moved, or something moved. That's already still ambiguous. How do you nail it down? They go on and they say, okay, he moved his arm. That's the kind of he moved that we're talking about. But even there, you're left with the question about whether this is, whether moving has to be voluntary or whether it could just be a twitch, and so on. So there is a problem at the start of all of these as well. Every word in that list gives some problem about what exactly does it mean. But notice what we now have is a narrative kind of definition, very much like the thing that we sort of said we actually needed before. It's not, NSN is not a language, but there's a language that's very much like NSM. And this is Toki-Pona. It's a language that has 14 phonemes. Its total vocabulary of 118 words. Total vocabulary of 118 words. And a very, very restricted grammar. I think the EBNF is 5 lines long or something like that, 4 lines long. Very restricted. It's designed to do as much as possible with as little as possible, and it seems to work pretty well. It does this by, in contrast with NSM, the words are very, very, very general. NSM, the important thing is each one of these words has one very specific meaning. Toki-Pona, the essential thing is each one of these words has, well, maybe one meaning, but it certainly isn't specific. It's very, very, very broad. The word Toki in the name of the language means language in the name of the language. But it also means talks to, talks about, says. Linguistic conversation, message, means, and probably a whole bunch of other things. I'm getting people flagging me to shut up. Let me jump. I will in fact shut the head up. Just to say 2 things. One of them is that there's a lesson for language presentation for conlangers, and indeed for just ordinary languages. What arises out of all these things is that there is, in every language, this is the NSN point, there is in every language a core. A very small vocabulary, a very small number of frames that can be used to say quite a lot about quite a lot, as Toki-Pona will show. So that there is a central part that can be used so that a person could, in fact, if he knew only that of the language, could talk for quite some time intelligently and intelligibly about just about anything. And it would be to the advantage of people who are trying to teach their languages. Some of you, want other people to speak your things. It would be to their advantage if they built their teaching things from this core. Too often, when you are given the new language, you get one of two things. You either get a really minimal, really tiny vocabulary, a very tiny set of frames that you can't, the result is that you can't say anything much beyond see, dick, run. You know. And sometimes you don't even get dick. And the other thing is that you just sort of dump the whole thing on everybody right at the beginning. Logland and Logeband, who I know best, have fallen in both of these traps at one time or another. There's one textbook of Logland, the end of which you can give your name and where you're from and what you do, and that's about the limit of what you've got. And the other extreme is the Logeband book, where you get the complete Logeband language, whole thing, no breakdown. So it is advantageous to do the this core language, where somebody gets into the language, can do things in the language, and gets the habit of the language, and goes on from there. Secondly, this core language, if you pick it right, can be used as this way to introduce more things. Somebody going along says, you know, it takes me a hell of a long time to say the cat is on the mat, because there's no word for mat and no word for cat and no word for on. I'm describing Toki Pona at this point. So the response is, well, look, what you mean by on is we could invent this other word over here, and this will do the trick. So we can introduce new words sort of on a demand basis. You need a word for this? Well, it happens we have one. Let me tell you about it. And here's how it's defined in terms of words you already know. So these are the two things I think that semantic prime languages tell us. To go for the simple and build on it, and to use this as a defining language. For the semantic prime languages themselves, they are a dead end. They either fall into the trap of getting bound up like Aoi in more and more complex and unintelligible things, or they fall in, they remain pure like Toki Pona, and it then takes you a page and a half to say, good morning, how's the weather in a certain part of the country. The ideal thing is to start small and grow, and eventually what you end up being is, depending on how you grow, either Logland, Logeband with a wider core that you then use to put things together and build new things out of, or Esperanto, where you just steal from everybody else as you need it. And my advice is that actually is the way to go. Logland, Logeband, and Esperanto are the appropriate models. I only ran 15, 20 minutes over, yeah, and I didn't only read half the paper, but yeah, yes.
Speaking of the
No, not at all. Yes.
Ideals.
Start small, grow, grow. What hope is there for somebody like me who started big? Because she thought basically that, she didn't know how to articulate it then, but sort of the dissocier notion that words mean because they are different from one another, rather than that they are the same or have some kind of similarity. That meaning does not necessarily have to indicate similarity. I and huge long words when I was little that are still in daily life.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm not so much talking about the process of creation.
Creating, okay,
I'm talking about the process of transmission.
yes.
Creation, trying to talk, laying down rules for creation is one of the really, really stupid things that only philosophers do. Far from the only stupid thing that philosophers do, but one of the most egregious. And no, you will create the language the way it comes to you. Tokipona, for example, came, as far as I can figure out from what Jan Sonia says, came to her virtually in a flash. She had a list, she had the total vocabulary laid out within the first week of doing this. First was 180 words, how much problem did she have? For most languages, yeah, it's going to come to you in a very, you start with your own language, and you sort of, for most people, I think it's a process of filling in to that, building more and more of your own language in the sense of being able to cover the situations that your own language covers, whether it's verbatim or totally different kind of process. But for passing it on, you don't pass it on by dumping the whole thing on somebody, and you don't pass it on to adults by sending them back to Dick and Jane. You start in the middle someplace. The middle is around 100 to 200 words, half dozen sentence frames. And your 200 words picked very carefully. There's a list at the end of my handout of 200 some odd words that various and sundry people have thought were a good place to start.
Thank you, that's really important.
Do we have any other short questions? Any volunteers?
But I guess I'll just make a comment. Oh, thank you. The way you describe this core, then this nebulous thing that's the whole language, is very much like in mathematics. You have the axiom in the middle, then all these theorems, all these other things that's nebulous. And it's like Gödel says, you cannot, even though just a core of axioms is not enough to prove everything, but it proves enough things that most mathematicians can forget Gödel, but once in a while they have to pick him up. So it's just sort of comment how there's a sort of a isomorphism here.
Not quite an isomorphism in the sense that I don't think that the core that you set up is necessarily going to establish limited. I mean, if you choose a different set of axioms in mathematics, you can prove a different set of theorems. I think that I kind of believe the SM program, that there is a kernel of words. I don't think the current list is it. And I don't incidentally think that there's only one list that'll work. But you could build a list, and you could build various lists. That would work equally well, and that will, in fact, get you anywhere you want to go with a little bit of work on the edges. So I don't think it's that where you start is limited in that way. But yeah, but it's just the whole idea that every system can be reduced to its core and built up from the core again.
My apologies, John, but I think I'm going to have to cut you off there.
Okay.